Hello everyone, we are here with another Modern Magic League, but this time it's not Twiddlestorm. We are testing out Case of the Ransacked Lab. So I know that the new hot thing from Karlov Manor is the Leyline, and everyone's playing Leyline Rhinos. That's boring, I'm not interested. Creatures, what are those? We're playing Case of the Ransacked Lab in Modern Blue-Red Storm. I think this is the most natural home for it. Modern Storm has traditionally played the cost reducers, Baral, Goblin Electromancer, and we do that because our rituals are kind of bad if we don't play the cost reducers, right? So Poetic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, if we have a cost reducer in play, they turn into Red Dark Ritual, which is very cool. The other nice thing about Case is that it is an engine on its own if it is solved. So one of the tricky things about traditional Blue-Red Storm is that you needed a reducer, but then you also needed an engine. And more recently, that has been Gifts Ungiven and Past in Flames for the typical gifts pile. But you might notice that the list I'm playing here today has no Gifts Ungiven. And part of that comes from trying to maximize what Case is doing. So first of all, I don't like the idea of running 4 Case and then like 4 Baral or something like that, and just using this as a straight up swap for reducers in a traditional Blue-Red Storm list. The problem with that is that Case comes down on turn 3. That means that playing Case, you're really not winning until turn 4. Turn 4 is probably too slow a lot of the time if you do not have some sort of interaction to slow your opponent down. Additionally, it kind of ignores the solved portion of Case and the ability of Case to act like an engine. So my approach to fixing this is, well, Case draws us a whole bunch of cards and can act as an engine. The One Ring is very powerful and can do the same sort of thing, draw a whole bunch of cards, and to some extent, a little bit less so, but to some extent can act like an engine. And so my goal is to play a slower, more interactive early game that buys time for us to get the One Ring and Case online, and then eventually we close out the game with either a natural Past in Flames or maybe some sort of grapeshot remand grapeshot setup. To that end, I want to play really as much interaction as I can possibly squeeze into this list. So I'm playing the full 4 remand. We're playing 3 grapeshot. Again, when we're not necessarily going to be storming with a cost reducer in play a lot of the time, we're not going to be able to storm for as big of a combo. A lot of the time, we just need to kind of, maybe we chip in with a lightning bolt, and then we just barely get there with like a grapeshot remand grapeshot with no reducer in play. So we want to sort of combo in that way after controlling the game for a little while with our remands. We're playing Spell Pierces in the main deck. We're playing Lightning Bolt. Spell Pierce just another answer against the Cascades, so we have 6 counter spells for the Cascade cards. We have Lightning Bolt for creature decks. We have Spike Field, and we have Grapeshot, which can double as an interactive spell as well. Then it's Cantrips, Rituals, the usual package. The list here is very tight. I feel like I would like another cantrip or 2, maybe some opts to really leverage some of the counter spells. I'd like a little bit more interaction. I'd like the 4th Spike Field. I'd like maybe a 3rd Spell Pierce. I'd like the 4th Grapeshot, maybe. I'm not sure about that one. I'd maybe like the 4th One Ring, but I just did not have the slots. So it's tough. The main deck here can... It feels like there's several other things you want to include a little bit of, and it just feels like there's not really room for it. I don't really think we can cut further down on lands. I already shaved a little bit there. And I think this is kind of the maybe the best we can do. I'm not saying this is a fully finalized list, but you're kind of limited by the deck size to some extent. So again, an attempt at a higher interaction, slower game Storm style deck, similar to what was going on with the Spikefield Hazard Flame of Anor lists. But this time we're not playing Flame of Anor because we can't really maximize it without wizards. So we're doing something similar, but then playing Case and One Ring as our longer term ways of closing out the game after we've kept our opponent off balance for the first few turns. Our sideboard cards complement that. Flusterstorm for Cascade, as well as just other general instant and sorcery. Stern Scolding for creature decks, or decks where Spell Pierce is bad, in particular Yawgmoth, but also something with Grief or even Solitude. Echoing Truth as a general catch-all answer. Empty for situations where we feel like we have more time. The control decks, where our win cons in One Ring and Case are perhaps going to be a little bit more taxed. Blood Moon, it's always nice to be able to ritual one out. Jegantha, because we are able to play Jegantha, and then a extra copy of the One Ring for when we really want to board that up. This is a little bit more of a testing slot, the extra One Ring, because I basically want to think about how often do I want that fourth One Ring in the deck. Now, overall, I feel like this deck is not as good as Twiddle, which I've been playing recently, but I think there are some interesting things here, and I could see a world where this is decent. I feel like maybe Storm still needs another card, but there's some interesting stuff here. And with that in mind, let's head into this set of matches and see how it goes. Okay, so we are here with round number 1, game number 1. And we have an interesting situation here where we've drawn all 4 of our considers in our opening hand. Now, I went and did the math on this, and we have 8 4-ofs in our deck. We would find it equally unlikely to draw any particular 4-of. And the chances of drawing any particular 4-of when you have 8 4-ofs in your deck in your opening hand is about 1 in 2,000. So we got very lucky or perhaps very unlucky. But either way, we do keep this, figuring that we've got a couple lands and we can cantrip and find some way to combo based on this. Now, our opponent leads on a tapped Overgrown Tomb. We pick up a One Ring for the turn, and we're going to play a land, just holding up the possibility of Consider here. Our opponent plays Hapatra, pretty much confirming that they are on Yawgmoth. So we see a Lightning Bolt with our first Consider, and we'll happily keep that, because then we can just go ahead and kill this Hapatra. And then we can use our second Consider. Now, I do think this was a bit of a mistake fetching the Mountain here. I should have fetched a Steam Vents so that I can, next turn, play double Consider if needed. Our opponent plays a Grist. End step, we will Consider. We find a Preordain. We don't need an additional cantrip. Picking up Past in Flames is decent. This is something we will eventually need. But we do really need another land. And we don't find one. We do find a Ritual, which does at least let us play the One Ring this turn. I would have been happier with a land, though, because this means that we're still kind of a ways from comboing, even with this Past in Flames in hand, because we just need to find so much mana. We need a total of 6 mana to use this Past in Flames naturally. We pick up Case. Our opponent just plays out a bunch of dorks. Another Insect, Dried Arbor, Delighted Halfling. This could read as a Bowmasters, but I don't really have a choice to do anything other than tap the One Ring here. If they do, my hand is not developing in any other way. I don't have another land, so that's something we just have to risk. We do pick up another land, which is nice. And here I choose to pass, which I think in hindsight was a bit of a mistake. I should have played the case. But my thought process... What is happening here? Okay, wait. No, hang on. I think I just spam clicked a lot. So let's hang on a second here and talk through what just happened. So I chose not to play the case, thinking that I wanted to keep up the possibility of like considering into an interaction spell, or maybe double considering and turning these into something useful. And in hindsight, I think, yeah, getting the case down first would have been more valuable. I think my thought process at that time was I didn't have that many things that really needed a cost reduction in hand. So we went for the considers, but my opponent on their turn just played a Shield Druid, which now means that we have one turn here to do something. Otherwise, this Shield Druid is going to kill us. So we lose 2 life for the ring. We draw a card for turn, lose 2 life to Shield Druid. We have a fetch land, and we have to fetch to 8 in order to get another land. And we can draw some cards, which we kind of have to do, because if we don't draw cards, the question is, what are we doing? Yes, we could kill Shield Druid, but then we're dead to 3 damage from the ring, plus their attack, plus Grist -5. So we need to do a little bit better than that. So we draw 3 cards. A start would have been finding 6 mana in order to be able to cast this Past in Flames. But we don't, so we do have very fringe chances still, because what we can do is we can play Case, we can Pyretic Ritual, and then we can Bolt Grapeshot the Shield Druid, which will kill the Shield Druid, and we have 1 mana left over with which we can draw Manamorphose. And now, if off of this Manamorphose we draw a Ritual, we can play Past in Flames and have access to our graveyard and win the game. So we play the Manamorphose. We get Remand, which is not the greatest here. So we can remand the Grapeshot, which is nice, but the problem is, even if I Grapeshot and wiped their board, we are still dead to this Grist. Theoretically, my out at this point is Remand, drawing Morphos into Ritual. So it has to be a Manamorphose into a Ritual, because the thing is we need to get up to 4 mana for this Past in Flames. So we technically have chances, and we just draw the Ritual. So if that was just swapped places with this Remand, we could have had this. But it turns out that we don't have game number 1 here. I don't know why I cast the Ritual. Alright, so we lose game number 1 against Yawgmoth. I mean, Yawgmoth is a good deck, and the Shield Druid was very timely, because if it weren't for that, I think we would have had 2 more turns, and I think we could have certainly gotten there. Maybe we play like the Case, and then like a Ritual Grape, wipe a little bit of their board, and then win the turn after. But, I mean, they put cards in their deck in order to draw and play them, and Shield Druid is certainly a powerful card. So we are on to game number 2. So our game number 2 hand is, again, decent. We have a Stern Scolding and a couple Spikefield Hazards as interaction. We have a Consider, and we have Ritual One Ring. So our plan is to disrupt our opponent with our interaction while we get to the One Ring. We've revealed our Gigantha, and so we'll lead on Scalding Tarn, and I'm just going to pass the turn here. If we need to Spikefield Hazard something, we can. Otherwise, we can just go ahead and play this Consider. So they play a Delighted Halfling. I get a Steam Vents, and I go for Consider. Now, I could get the Surveil land, but again, oh, wait, sorry. I forgot I had the Stern Scolding. Yeah, so we go for the Stern Scolding to just slow them down as much as we can here. Additionally, Delighted Halfling turns off our counter magic in the future, so this is kind of a must stop if I want to be able to use Stern Scolding fully effectively. Like, let's say they're playing a Yawgmoth. If they have Halfling, then we can't Stern Scolding it. So we draw a second land, which we do go ahead and play here. I keep both of the Spikefield Hazards in hand in case, and I really don't want to have to I really don't want to have to do this, but if I need to remove a 2 toughness creature. I could think about playing one tapped, even though I drew the mountain, so that next turn I could be guaranteed to Ritual Ring, but I feel like I'm reasonably likely to hit another land with this Consider. Our opponent plays a Haywire Might, which I'm going to remove at end step, and then we can Consider. We do in fact find another land, which we will keep. Our opponent has missed their land drop, so they were clearly relying very heavily on that Delighted Halfling. And we're just going to Ritual out the ring on turn 3. And we draw a Lightning Bolt. Perfect. More interaction. They're at 1 land. We have Remand Bolt, Spikefield Hazard, and an active 1 ring, so I feel very good about this game. So our opponent goes for a Bowmasters in response to our ring. We kind of have our pick of what we want to do. I end up going for Remand, figuring that if we let it resolve and then kill it, it's going to create the Orc army, and that could maybe be a clock on us in some way. Additionally, I want to leverage the card draw from this Remand, because at this point I'm just looking to figure out how to get to the point where I can kill them. We end up drawing Metamorphose Preordain, so we will go ahead and cast this Preordain, and we will happily keep this Past in Flames. And then, because we have double Lightning Bolt, I feel like we can definitely afford to play this land. So this Past in Flames is going to be our engine. And now we're looking for a grapeshot. We do need a little bit more mana, probably, but our opponent plays Wall of Roots into a Chalice of the Void on 1. So that is annoying. It does stop our Lightning Bolts. We draw a Stern Scolding, which is kind of useless. Here I'm going to play Case. We can Ritual. We can Metamorphose. Here we can Past in Flames. And even if we don't fully get there with 2 mana spells, now remember our opponent has a Chalice on 1, we can probably at least solve this case and have a bunch of cards in hand. Well, I mean, we can certainly solve this case, but we'll solve the case, have a bunch of cards in hand, and be very likely to be able to win next turn. So we're Metamorphosing. We played a second case, and then we have Grapeshot. We have a Remand in our graveyard, and then we can Grapeshot again, and that's going to do it for game number 2 here. So, and we even just drew the extra Grapeshot. So had we wanted to do, well, we only have 1 mana left. But basically we could have triple Grapeshotted if we had 1 more mana. So, a pretty good game. I mean, our opponent missed their land drop, so doing that on the draw against a 1 ring deck feels pretty brutal, but certain things worked as intended. We used our interaction to buy time for ring to win us the game. And let's go to game number 3 and see what happens next. So game number 3, this hand is not that good. We do have Mountain Bolt, but the problem is we don't have... I clicked through it. But we don't have any blue mana. And even if we draw another land, what were we really doing with that? Not a lot. This hand is very similar to the last hand, but it is just a 6, and we do have the Spikefield that we can play. I'm going to go ahead and keep it here, because I think that hand, while not great, does have at least some chances, and I think it's better than going to 5. So we're going to actually ship this mana. We ship the remand. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So basically, we have a bolt as a piece of interaction. If we draw a blue source, we need this to consider. And again, our goal is to just get the One Ring into play as soon as we can. So we draw a Spire Bluff for turn. That's excellent. Blue source, land. I'm going to play that over Spike Field in case I need to use this as interaction. And I'm going to consider now before they have 2 mana for Bowmasters. I don't need an additional copy of One Ring, so I pick up a Desperate Ritual. I'm reasonably happy about that. Note, our opponent didn't play a turn 1 creature, so no halfling. So that makes me more likely to suspect that they have some sort of interactive 2-drop. They play a Wall of Roots. So not interactive or not hateful, but definitely something that is going to accelerate out their mana. We draw a Lightning Bolt, which means that we can play the Spikefield Cave and pass the turn because we do need to play our lands. Depending on what they have as interaction, we potentially have Lightning Bolts to shut it down. They still haven't played anything, so I'm going to go ahead and bolt their face here. Just try to get in some chip damage. Thundering Falls is a land. Surveil. And I do keep that Spikefield Hazard, just figuring, again, maybe a Bowmasters or something like that. I might need it. Or worst case, I can treat it as a land. So I'm going to double Ritual here in order to play the One Ring. I would have preferred to have drawn an untapped land so I didn't have to burn the second Ritual, but I need to just get the One Ring into play. Now I'm going to pass here until their turn, because they do have Bowmaster mana up. So I'd rather waste the mana on their turn with the One Ring. Note, I'm doing this on their upkeep, so in case they draw Bowmasters, they can't Bowmasters in response, but if they already had it in their hand, now they've had to spend the mana on their turn. We're immune to the Bowmaster's damage, but it does create a larger token, so our opponent would still want to flash it in if they could. And they draw a Twilight Mire, and then they have a Soulless Jailer to shut off any Past in Flames shenanigans that we might be able to do. And they're kind of running low on cards. It just feels like they had a lot of mana in the Soulless Jailer, so they're leaning pretty heavily on the Soulless Jailer. We do have the possibility to kill it with Spikefield Hazard plus Lightning Bolt, but maybe we don't even need to use our graveyard. And that's one nice benefit of this Giftsless package, or this Giftsless build. We can just win without the graveyard reasonably often. That's not to say that the graveyard doesn't help, it does, but it's possible. Bowmasters, so they do have a Bowmasters now in response to our ring. If maybe they either drew it, or they were saving it for when they'd be able to damage us with the second trigger, which if so, I think that is probably a mistake. But they play it, but we have Spikefield Hazard to remove it before they can get the second trigger with the card draw. We pick up Echoing Truth and Remand. So Remand is nice in that if they were to just jam a Yawgmoth or something like that, we can remand it by a turn. Echoing Truth gives us a cleaner answer to the Soulless Jailer if needed. We don't really have the ability to win yet, but again, this is sort of leveraging some of the ideas that I talked about with this build, where we have a bunch of interactive spells, we're accruing card advantage with the ring, we're playing a little bit of a slower controlling style, and then eventually we're looking to win. We're not under very much pressure due to some of our control. In this game, not as much, but, well, we did take out a Bowmasters. I mean, this game could be different if they just had a live Bowmasters that we were drawing into with the ring. And we pick up Case, which is nice. Again, we don't really have enough to just win here. So our Pyretic Ritual, play Case, or, oh, Morphos, sure. Consider. Morphos again. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to turn on the case, have a solved case, while still holding a mana up for Remand or Bolt or whatever on their turn. So that's why I'm playing these Morphoses before case, because if I had played case, then I would have had to use my last mana in order to do some of this ritual casting, and then I wouldn't be able to hold up interaction. And I'm figuring that I'm not really going to be able to win this turn. Had I gone for it before, I would have been basically relying on hitting a grapeshot with a couple of those draws from Manamorphose, which I think is not that likely. And in particular here, we actually, with the land drop, it means we can hold up Scolding plus Remand, or Truth plus Remand, or something like that in combination. So we solve the case, which is very nice. And we are almost certainly going to be able to win next turn. So we're just looking to remove this Soulless Jailer and then win when it gets back to us. Our opponent plays yet another Wall of Roots. They have all of the mana in the world. On the end step, I can fetch. I'm going to fetch a tapped Steam Vents, and then I'm not actually going to use the Echoing Truth on the Jailer yet, just because I really don't need to save that mana, I don't think. And I'd maybe rather have the Storm, as well as the spell to sort of kickstart case, because otherwise I look at my cards here, I have 2 counter spells. Now, yes, I can draw with the One Ring, but I wouldn't mind having just a spell that I can kind of guarantee a nice start with case. I mean, there is Bolt too, but it feels a little bit nicer to have things set up like that. So we draw Grapeshot, we draw another Remand, so now we're just going to be totally fine. So we can Manamorphose, we draw, and our opponent concedes. They see that it's over here. We have 10 cards in hand, an active case, and yeah, they have 3 Wall of Roots. So a pretty nice round 1 win over Green-Black Yawgmoth. Definitely, I'd be curious to see what any of you are doing with Case of the Ransacked Lab. Let me know in the comments, or definitely feel free to link me to any other lists or builds that are floating around. This is just, again, my idea of how to sort of capitalize on what Case can bring by shifting a little bit from some of the traditional Storm plans. There could certainly be other versions of this, and I would be interested in hearing about or seeing them. So without further ado, let's get on to match number 2. So we are 1-0, revealing our Gigantha to start off match number 2. We have an opening hand here that has some burn, it has a case, it has a couple lands, exactly what we're looking for. We maybe have a hand where we're going to be looking at having to burn some spells to turn on case to have that act as our engine. I think, if I recall correctly, both of our wins so far have come on the back of the One Ring. So maybe we'll have a hopeful win that doesn't rely on the One Ring. That being said, the One Ring is nice and powerful. So Hallowed Fountain, and I'm like, okay, control. And then they play Spring Relief Drum, and I'm like, Hammer. So they're playing blue-white Hammer. And they have the Ornithopter to activate the Spring Leaf Drum and play a turn 1 Esper Sentinel. Now, I could remove the Esper Sentinel here, but I could also just wait a turn and not give them a card. And I'd rather wait a turn and not give them the card. And I am going to keep this extra Bolt on top against Hammer. I really do just want as much removal as I possibly can. As much removal as I can get. So I'm going to wait to remove this Hammer, just in case maybe they play like a Scarda's Aid, and go for a hammer on Sentinel or something like that, and then I can kill it in response. Instead, they go for another Sentinel, so now I'm going to kill this Sentinel because I don't want to give them a card off of the second Sentinel. And then they play a third Sentinel, so that's not fun. We draw a Remand, so I'm going to play a tapped Spikefield Cave and just pass the turn. If we have to, we could kill one. I'd really rather not, though, just because, again, I don't want to give them cards. So they play a Cryptic Coat, so that might be one of the things that they're playing blue for. Personally, I feel like this seems a little bit slow for Modern to me, but it is a very powerful card out of the new set, and I'm curious to see what it can do. The Ward is definitely annoying from the perspective of a deck that is just trying to burn their creatures. We pick up a Desperate Ritual. So we're going to go for a Ritual here. I need to get this case into play, and between Ritual, Bolt, Grapeshot, I can remove all of their creatures other than the Cloak and turn on this case. It will give them 2 cards, but I'm gonna have to give them cards at some point. And if I do it this way, I only need to give them the 2 cards once, because both these Sentinels will then be dead. Whereas if I just like play case, I give them two cards, and then the next turn maybe I give them 2 more cards. And especially with no engine in play via the One Ring, I'm just interested in turning on this case as soon as I possibly can. We're going to Ritual, we're going to Bolt, and then we are going to Grapeshot, killing both of the Sentinels. And we can also take out this Ornithopter for good measure. It does turn off one of their mana with the Springleaf Drum, or it forces them to use their Cryptic Cloak thing for it, rather than being able to attack with that. So our case is solved. We have only a Remand in hand, and this is sort of illustrating one of the reasons why we do need some Past in Flames. Sometimes we have to burn a large portion of our hand in order to turn the case on, and then we have a bunch of cards in our graveyard, and I would really like to be able to use this case in order to, or use a Past in Flames in order to recast the spells that we used to solve the case. Especially if the process of solving the case, this time it didn't, but sometimes it might involve us, you know, playing like a Metamorphose and then a couple cantrips and drawing some cards. So Past in Flames, to really provide a way to win with the advantage that either case or ring provides, ties things together nicely. Now our opponent went ahead and played a Pure Steel Paladin, and then they attached a Colossus Hammer. So that was probably like one of the worst possible outcomes there could have been for us. So now we're dead next turn multiple different ways. This Cloak has Ward on it, which is kind of scary. They also have an Ink Moth in play, and we have a Remand. But we do have a solved case, and we draw a Consider. So that will draw us 2 cards. It'll be draw a card, surveil, draw a card. So we draw a Remand, which is really not what we want to see. And I could Remand this Consider, but if I do, I'm kind of just relying on one of my top 2 cards being a Ritual. And this Consider already lets me rely on that because it surveils and then draws a card, right? So I see a Preordain, and I do take this Preordain because now I can dig substantially deeper looking for a Ritual. Because basically at this point what I need Ritual, I need Metamorphose. And we Preordain. Drawing a card, Metamorphose is perfect. That's exactly the sort of card we need. And then we see Metamorphose Poetic Ritual, which is, again, absolutely amazing. So Pyretic Ritual, we draw a card. Morphos, we're going to get to draw 2 cards. One of them is a Consider, and then the other is another Metamorphose. So we are running very hot right now. And then we pick up the Past in Flames and the Grapeshot. So at this point, it's over. Add a couple more mana. We can play a land. We can play more Metamorphoses. More Metamorphoses. We even drew a ring. So my original plan going into this turn was, even if we couldn't win this turn, at least let's play a ring and then try to win next turn. Use the ring as a big fog. And we have grapeshot. And they concede. Wait, do they concede? No, they don't concede yet. Here I'm going to go ahead and win with grapeshot, and then I'm going to remand. Now I could have passed in flames and grapeshotted again, but I don't necessarily want to show them that I use the graveyard. I mean, Storm does traditionally use the graveyard, but maybe if they don't see any graveyard-based use, then maybe they won't bring in Graveyard Hate or something like that. So I'm going to use the grapeshot remand plan. Again, and that's just a matter of something that's very common with combo decks, where when you know you're able to win in such a way that shows your opponent as little as possible, or win in a way that doesn't give them new information if possible. Even if it's a little bit more convoluted on your end, as long as it's a sure thing. You don't want to like try to win in a certain way and then miss, but you want to minimize the information you give away. So we are up a game over Hammer, and we are on to game number 2. So our game number 2 hand here is, I'm not super excited about it, but we do have a Spike Field, which could maybe kill an Esper Sentinel. We have a Remand if we need it. We have the Ring as something that we can play towards. So I am going to go ahead and keep it. Our opponent leads on Plains Pass, which makes me think that they maybe have, now they did mulligan 6, but it makes me maybe think that they have some sort of like turn 2 powerful play, like a Stone Forge or something like that. We pick up a land, which is decent. We do need those in order to be able to get to playing the ring. I'm going to just pass this turn with Scalding Tarn up. If I need to Spikefield Hazard, I could. I could also fetch my Surveil land. So they play an Urza's Saga. And then they play an Esper Sentinel. And it turns out I'm going to go ahead and fetch the Surveil land here anyway. Again, I don't want to give a card to this Esper Sentinel, so I can just kill this next turn. I am going to keep the Ritual on top of my deck, because it is a way to play the ring on turn 3, which is something I would certainly like to do. And again, I'm passing. There's no reason to kill this Esper Sentinel yet. Maybe there's something that I need to remand that's scarier, and then I can just take the 1 damage in the meantime. But they pass the turn, so I'm going to go ahead and Spikefield to kill this now, paying the 1 so that they don't draw the card. And we pick up Spire Bluff, so now it's looking like our opponent just wants to make a Saga token. Now I am going to go ahead and Ritual out the ring here. Saga could potentially get Pithing Needle, and that is something to think about. But if they're going to get Pithing Needle, they probably are anyway. And generally, if they don't already have a hammer, it may mean that they need or want to get a hammer. So I do choose to play the ring here. We at least get a draw, and we can potentially draw into one of our Echoing Truths or something like that. Note that we boarded in all of our Echoing Truths. So we get to potentially draw into one of our Echoing Truths, bounce the Pithing Needle, and then start using our ring again if needed. But it turns out they chose to get Colossus Hammer. So I'm not 100% sure if Hammer plays Pithing Needle right now. So that was another factor where I just kind of went for it. The other thing is, what am I doing there if I'm not just playing it? So we don't really have anything else going on here other than multiple copies of the One Ring. So we're going to draw some cards. We still don't really have anything going on. Note that I can't really bolt one of these constructs because they could just turn the Ink Moth into an artifact and then my bolt would do nothing. And I'm just going to go ahead and play another ring. I don't want to really be taking damage, because I still feel like I'm a little bit of a ways away from comboing. So while I could probably live an attack, especially using Remand to stop, like, let's say they had a Pure Steel Paladin or something like that, I'm going to be under pressure between this ring, the constructs. They could turn this Ink Moth into an artifact. If they play a couple more artifacts, they could conceivably just kill me there between like the self-ring damage and some big constructs. So I am going to play this second ring, and I'm going to keep my first ring just because I want to draw kind of as many cards as possible. So our opponent plays another Urza's Saga, plays a Forge anew, and yeah, they would have been able, well, no, I could have remanded the Forge anew, but still, I'm pretty happy with my choice of playing the One Ring there. So I draw an Echoing Truth, which is definitely nice, and I draw some more cards here that could maybe let me win this game. So I don't have a ton of draw, but I do have Consider and Morphos. I have Case, and I have some Rituals. And my thought process here is I can play Case, and I can kind of go for it. And if I happen to find the win here, then great. And if I don't, then I can just play another copy of the One Ring. Now my opponent plays Surge of Salvation. I could remand this and try to continue going for the win this turn, but I'm totally happy to just play another copy of the One Ring here and then not have to worry about this being in my opponent's hand. I am, however, going to make sure that I cast enough spells to trigger this Case so that I'm getting the card draw next turn from it. And I'm reloaded and able to win next turn. I can play the ring. I can even hold up Remand for use on my opponent's turn if necessary. Again, I'm keeping my ring that has more counters just because I want to be able to draw as many cards as possible. So we've solved the Case. We're holding up Remand. We're going to be able to draw approximately infinite cards next turn. And on end step, I think about bouncing a construct, but I instead choose to bolt my opponent and draw a card with Case. I maybe need to bounce like the Hammer instead or something like that, or depending on what my opponent does, maybe they have another Surge of Salvation. Note that they didn't play anything, so maybe I need to be able to like Echoing Truth in response in order to live another turn because now I'm out of rings. So different options like that are things that I'm thinking about. So our opponent is going to try to surge on our upkeep. Now, a couple different things here. One is that yes, we can remand it. They do have a plains to replay it, but if I can find a second remand, then that would be able to counter it. So we are going to go for the remand. We draw a card. Bolt is not exactly what we need. But we do draw the second remand. We did have a lot of draws there. So had we needed to, we could have drawn 4 cards with the ring. We could have played our Ritual, our Morphos, our Echoing Truth, even this Bolt that we drew. And we could have probably found another remand. Or if we didn't find a remand, at least shut down the ability or like bounce both of their constructs, so that they would have nothing to equip this hammer on other than Ink Moth, which we could kill with Bolt in response. So we have decent chances there. But we found the remand, which is good because now we can remand Surge again, and now they are out of white mana. We drew Past in Flames, we'd have multiple Rituals, and we just have an abundance of riches at this point where we've got all of the Rituals, both our Case and our One Ring are live. We're drawing 1,000,000 cards, and everything is going great. We can kind of win at our leisure. And we do with... Oh wait, I passed in flames first. Oh, I think I was just making sure that I would have a remand available if I needed it. I don't know why I'm still casting spells and not just casting grapeshot here. Sometimes you just want to, though. Alright, oh, just so that maybe I didn't lower my mana too much if I needed to. So yeah, so we can grapeshot and they concede. And we pick up match number 2 over blue-white hammer. And through triple, well, really it was double, but like they cast it 3 times, like triple Surge of Salvation over a couple turns. Matchup felt pretty good. Ring was pretty essential for us to be able to fog them for multiple turns there. But, you know, we played as a control deck, and then we slowly won. Like, look, this is a turn 6 combo win. So we are on to match number 3. So for match number 3, we open on a hand that just doesn't have any lands, so we can't keep this after having revealed our Gigantha. Our second hand here is decent, so we can go ahead and keep this. I'm going to ship the Otawara. And, you know, we have some interaction. We have Pierce, Bolt, Hazard. We have a Ritual. We do need to find some business. And our opponent leads on the current hot card from Karlov Manor, Leyline of the Guild Pact. So they're playing the Scion of Draco's Rhinos list almost certainly. Now, we do have Spell Pierce, which is good against the Rhinos portion of the combo, but we have absolutely nothing here against Scion. And our opponent does have turn 2 Scion. So we are under a bit of a clock. Now we find the One Ring, which is good. That is, we need an engine, and it will also buy a turn against Scion. So the one thing about Scion is that it is not that fast. It's a 5-turn clock. So the key thing here is we need to shut down any potential Rhinos, note us leaving up this Spell Pierce, and we need to win before this Scion kills us. The Hexproof is really the big issue because a lot of our, really all of our removal is single target removal. So we can race this, but it's risky. So here I Ritual Ring. Now, they only have 2 lands in play, so it is possible that they have a Force of Negation in hand. That's a risk that I felt like we needed to take here. I could have burned a second Ritual and kept up Spell Pierce, but it doesn't really stop Force of Negation because they have the 2 mana open anyway. It would stop them potentially drawing another land and then hitting us with some Rhinos, but I feel like we are probably going to need this Ritual to win in hand because it just feels like we're so far away from comboing. And when we combo, we're going to need to combo big because our opponent's life total is so high because of the Scion of Draco. So the decision here is I'm going to take some risks now of potentially losing faster in order to have an overall higher chance of winning the match. And that's an important concept and something that it's important to be able to do sometimes. And it turns out our opponent has Force of Negation. So, you know, okay, they get us there. But as I was saying, it's important to sometimes make the play that will put you in a position to win the game rather than not lose the game, right? If you have to accept maybe you have a 30% chance to win right now and the decision is going to happen. Or you can do something that's going to like let you live a turn or two, but overall you have a 20% chance to win. You should just take the 30% right now. Even if there's just a high chance that you just immediately lose outright due to the opponent like having something or whatever. Only play around things that you can afford to play around. We draw an island. That's not necessarily what we need. Our opponent has a 3rd land, which threatens Rhinos. So we do pick up a case, but it's a little bit slow here. And for some reason, I'd ritualed out the case. I don't remember. Oh, I think what I was doing here is I was trying to preserve the ability to... I think what I was hoping for is that they'll go for like end step Rhinos, and then I can like Spell Pierce and turn it on, but I'm 1 mana off. I don't remember exactly what I was thinking here. Yeah, there was no reason to play that ritual there. It was just a mistake. But we're in just kind of dire circumstances anyway. I think it basically has to be like a chain of Manamorphoses at this point. Because we're going to get hit down to 3. I mean, we have the Spell Pierce for that. But getting hit down to 3 means that we are probably not winning this. We untap, draw a case, and that's not going to do it. So let's move on to game number 2. And our opening hand here for game number 2 was a bunch of rituals, a couple remands, and 1 land. It provided me with no way of... I'm sorry, I clicked through that a little bit fast. But it provided me with no way to really build up much of anything. So I went ahead and mulliganed that. And I think this hand is a lot better. Even though we don't have interaction at the moment, we do have a couple cantrips to potentially fish for it. We also have the ability to ritual out a copy of the One Ring. So in a slightly controversial take here, I'm going to send back this Manamorphose, because I need these cantrips to find me both a 3rd land and some sort of interaction. And Manamorphose is something that is useful when comboing, but it's not so useful before comboing. So we pick up a Remand, which is nice. There was also, did I keep a case there? I think I might have, yeah. So I kept a case. So now I have Remand available. And I can consider, or I can Remand, whatever their play is, if they have a turn 2 play, but if it's Scion in particular is what I mean. And so they do have a Scion that we are going to go ahead and Remand. We pick up Echoing Truth, which is nice, especially given that they have no Leyline. So given that they have Echoing Truth, I'm very comfortable just tapping out for case here, because if they go ahead and play Rhinos, we just have Echoing Truth as a clean answer to them. So they do go for the Rhinos while we're tapped out. I opt first, and the thought process behind that is that, yes, I could Ritual Ring, but if I opt first, there's a chance I turn on case and get to play Ring, which is something I would certainly like to do. And I did, by picking up a Manamorphose, end up in a spot where I can do that. So now I can Ritual, Manamorphose, Echoing Truth their Rhinos, and play the Ring. So I've played 4 spells. I can draw a card, play my land. I have a solve case, I have an active One Ring, I have a spell in my hand to start my chain. I'm almost certainly winning next turn. And they play more Rhinos, which is fine. Our Ring is actually kind of bad there. We draw 2 lands. I am going to fetch to Thin first. And then we're going to lead on this Consider. So if this Consider finds nothing, I probably won't use this Desperate Ritual and instead just hold up the Odawara as interaction. But if this Consider finds something valuable, then I can use it. So we draw a Grapeshot, we draw a Past in Flames, and that will do it. So Desperate Ritual, cast the, well, now we have a Preordain 2, and we're storming. So note that we had a Blood Moon there. There's no reason to show them the Blood Moon. Blood Moon coming in against Leyline is definitely pretty powerful because of layers. So even if they open on a Leyline, if we play the Blood Moon later, it will turn off all of their lands because layers. And our opponent concedes. So we are up now we're back to even. So we have match 3 coming up. And match 3 is the tough one because now we're going to be on the draw. So On the play, it's definitely a lot easier to play against the Cascade decks, but on the draw, it can get a lot harder. We do have interaction in Flusterstorm and Spell Pierce, but those only hit the Cascade spells. That doesn't let us hit the Scions, so it's going to depend on which part of their deck they draw. Okay, so we have a hand here where we have a turn 2 Blood Moon potentially. We also have Flusterstorm and Remand. So the big thing I would be concerned about is a Scion getting in under our permission. But we do pick up Otawara, which is decent, because this gives us a way to deal with a potential turn 2 Scion if needed. And we're going to hold up this Scalding Tarn and fetch an island so that we have an island accessible under our Blood Moon. Our opponent does have the perfect mana for Scion on turn 2. And we go ahead and we fetch the island and consider. So Spikefield Hazard. Do I keep that? Oh yeah, I keep that because I want to guarantee that we hit land drops in order to be able to play this Otawara on 4. Because now basically what's going to happen if I have this Blood Moon out is we are erasing the ability to bounce this Otawara with the Otawara, or bounce the Scion against the Scion. So basically I need to get to 4 mana. We draw Grapeshot for turn. And we go for the Ritual Blood Moon. Now maybe they have Force Negation here and then they just get us and then we probably lose this game. But they don't. And we have their 2 lands turned into mountains. So they have Scion. It's an interesting choice of whether our Blood Moons should be Blood Moons or should be Maguses. They do have, there's sort of mixed answers to both available. I think maybe they should be Maguses because, yeah, they actually should be Maguses because we have other enchantments that that our opponents are going to want to target, but we don't have any other creatures that they're going to want to target. So we play another land. If we have to, we can cycle this Morphos in order to try to hit another land. And here I do. We pick up a Flooded Strand, so that works. We pick up another land. And our opponent has a Force of Vigor for our Blood Moon, which is definitely very annoying here. So had we kept that Morphos, we could have Morphos and then had Remand plus Flusterstorm up, which would be pretty powerful. But the problem is we didn't know we were going to hit the land drop. And if we don't hit the land drop, then we just miss on being able to Otawara this Scion. And that feels pretty bad. So I chose to use the Metamorphose to guarantee we can Otawara the threat that I know is there. But it turns out that they had another thing that we need to deal with here. Now we do still potentially have chances here. If we Remand this Force of Vigor, then maybe they don't have another green card. They only have 3 cards in their hand. So we're going to go ahead and go for the Remand. And they have Force of Negation, which is brutal. Note that even if we had, well, if we had their Morphos Fluster, we would have 5 spells we'd be able to counter here. They do get to kill our Blood Moon, which is very annoying. They're going to get a tapped land, go to their turn. I think they probably didn't have the other, because if they had another Violent Outburst, they would have just played it there and made Rhinos. So I think they probably didn't have the other green card. It was just Force Negation. We're at 7 though, and we're under a lot of pressure. Our opponent has Shardless Agent. So maybe they had Shardless Agent. They may have had another green. And we can Fluster the Footfalls, but we're under a lot of pressure here. If we fetch, we're going to be going to 6. We do have this Otawara to potentially still buy us a turn. I'm putting that Morphos into the graveyard because what is that Morphos doing for me in my hand? Nothing. I need to draw... Really, I need a Past in Flames and maybe a case of the Ransacked Lab or something like that. So Tarn Pyretic Ritual is a start. It does mean that I have 6 mana in total, so Past in Flames is kind of the hope. Our opponent swings for 6. We Otawara the Scion. They choose to not replay the Scion, which screams that they have a Cascader. We pick up Past in Flames, so that's nice. So we go for Ritual, we play Past in Flames, and then we flashback a Pyretic Ritual. And it turns out that they picked up the second Force of Negation. Now, I think Force of Negation on the Pyretic Ritual is a very weird choice here. They should have Force of Negation to the Past in Flames, I think. Because I'm not dead to this Shardless Agent necessarily, because I'm at 3 life. So if they force the Past in Flames, let's say my hand is another Ritual or something like that. Or maybe another land even. Maybe I top deck another land or another Ritual, and now I have 7 mana to play the Past in Flames out of my graveyard. So while this does shut me down for this turn, I feel like it makes sense to force the Past in Flames. However, they had the Violent Outburst, so maybe they just had this in hand and knew that they had me dead if they waited. So now the Shardless Agent attacks for 3. And we're dead. So we lose to Leyline Rhinos. I think it was a pretty close match overall. I think probably the Blood Moons should be Magus of the Moon. I just had Blood Moons online and not Magus of the Moon, so I just played what I had. But if we're playing Moons, it should be Magus over Blood Moon. Alright. Well, we're 2-1, and let's see how the next round goes. So we have a opening hand here with 3 Spikefield Hazards. We're really drawing a lot of multiples this game. We have 1 land, Consider, Case. So this is totally keepable. These Spikefields can also be lands if needed, but they can also be interaction. And we're looking to just get our Case into play, solve it. Our opponent has mulligan to 4, which immediately makes me think Tron. And our opponent leads on Valakut Stoneforge. So our opponent is either on like Belcher or maybe Oops, something like that. We play a dual face land ourselves, and I'm playing this because I want to develop this Case as quickly as possible, and I know that they're probably, well, I mean, they could threaten something on turn 2, but off of a mulligan to 4, I think it's extremely unlikely that they threaten something on turn 2, so I just want to play my tap lands when I can. I know I'm not going to need these Spikefield Hazards in order to do anything interactive. So we draw a Spire Bluff Canal. We're going to go ahead and pass. Our opponent has a flashbacked Strike It Rich. So we're going to go for a Consider here. I don't need another Spire Bluff Canal. We pick up the One Ring, which is decent. It does potentially insulate us for a turn here. We're going to go for Pyretic, and then play the One Ring. And we're really looking to just draw an interaction spell before they draw some way to kill us. They have a 4th land. They have Belcher. They only have 2 mana right now. But on their upkeep, they go for Pyretic Ritual. So we need to draw interaction with this One Ring. And we don't. So we lose game number 1. Against Belcher, mull to 4. Yeah, I mean, we just didn't have any of our counterspells. If we have Remand or something like that, we could be in much better shape, but we just didn't draw it. And sometimes that happens. So it's on to game number 2. Our hand here is definitely decent. We have no interaction other than this Echoing Truth, but Echoing Truth can be relevant. We can potentially bounce some treasures if they have treasures. We could also bounce a Belcher that has been put in play that they don't have mana to activate yet. And a lot of the cards that we cut, we just don't really need Lightning Bolt. Stern Scolding doesn't really do anything, so I'll definitely take the possibility of Echoing Truth doing something interesting for me. There's also the possibility of recurring our own One Rings if we need to like fog them for multiple turns, potentially. Now, our opponent... Well, fogging them for multiple turns may not work because they can belch on our turn like they did last game, but there's situations where it could be useful. So we lead on our 1 land. And wait, we kept a 1 land with this? We were feeling brave. I'm not sure about that in hindsight. Oh, we figure we have the scry, so we have 2 looks. So we get rid of a 1 ring, and then we draw another 1 ring, which is not good. Our opponent also misses a land drop, discards a Strike It Rich, suggesting to me that they have a very explosive hand once they get a little bit of mana. So it feels like they have the Ritual, Iron Crag, Belcher, or something like that if they get 1 more red mana. So we draw a Steam Vents here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn to a ring. This will protect me against like exactly that set of Ritual, Ironcrag, Belcher. And we also have this Echoing Truth, so if they just like Ritual a Belcher into play, we can still remove it. But they don't draw another land. And we draw a Remand, so that's excellent. Now, I'm going to hold up my interaction here rather than play Case, because we could just be dead if we play Case. So I'd like to find 1 more land before I get this Case into play. So my opponent is that, oh yeah, okay. So my opponent discards a Strike It Rich on their turn, and they miss their land drop again. So we are pretty much a lock for this game at this point. We consider and find another land, which we play. The only slightly awkward thing is we weren't able to get Case into play there because we didn't have another land. But this is still just very good for us. We can discard the extra ring. We can discard Past in Flames, so that's in the graveyard anyway. I think discarding the extra Remand was a bit of a mistake. But I was kind of just figuring we'll be able to like Case, Ritual up, and Past in Flames win next turn. Our opponent passes the turn again. So we play Case. We draw a bunch of cards. We Ritual. Morphos. Ritual. Morphos. Ritual. Grape. We have Past in Flames in the yard. And it's just a lock at this point. And our opponent concedes. So again, yeah, I do think that they had what could have conceivably been a turn 2 if they found a red source, but they never went and found a red source. So not sure how many they play or what the odds on that were for them to miss for so many turns, but for the last few turns we had interaction and we would have been able to shut it down. So, on to game number 3. So our opening hand here in game number 3 has no lands, so we're going to have to mulligan this. This is okay, we have Remand, Echoing Truth, Cantrip to find another land. I'm going to ship this Grapeshot, I think. Do I ship the Grapeshot? Yeah, because what I'm looking for now is an engine, so I'll keep my Rituals to potentially turbo that out a little bit sooner. They have a tapped Shatter Skull. If they have the turn 2 here, they're just going to get us. Wait, do I hold the Spell Pierce? No, I don't. I think yeah, I preordain. And they did mull to 6 themselves, so I figured their odds of having the turn 2 are pretty low, and I do need to find another land. So as much as it pains me to get rid of Metamorphose Case here, I have to find another land or I'm not going to even be able to play this game. So I have to bottom both of them, and we do pick up a mountain, which is probably the worst land to draw here. Well, I guess it's better than a tap land, but it is still a land. We would draw an island then. So had I known these were coming, I maybe would have been able to keep Case, but I just didn't know that they were coming, so I can't risk it. Our opponent is still, again, sitting on one land, but here I have Remand, Spell Pierce, Echoing Truth up, so I have well, not all at once, but I have a nice mix of interaction depending on what they try to do. So they draw a Seagate, they go for a Defense Grid. Given that I have a certain amount of permission here, I can't really let that happen, so I Spell Pierce the Defense Grid. We pick up another Metamorphose. At some point I could cycle these if I need to. Our opponent plays Pyretic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, and then goes for a Belcher. So I let this resolve and figure that I will Echoing Truth it. Remand is a little bit more flexible as an answer, so I would like to be able to Echoing Truth where I can. Sometimes Echoing Truth will not save me, whereas Remand should always at least save me, or buy me a turn. Pick up a Thundering Falls, so we're continuing to develop our mana. I do keep this Remand on top, figuring I can more aggressively Remand when I know I'm going to draw into another Remand. They recross the paths, and again, I don't want to let them have that, so I'm going to Remand, drawing a Remand. And again, what we're looking for here is just an engine. So we draw Case, that's good. And here I make a bit of a mistake. So our opponent plays Recross the Paths, and I thought that you could solve Case on your opponent's turn. I didn't realize that it only triggers on your end step. I thought it triggered on each end step. So I go for the 4 spells, and then I become sad when I realize that Case does not trigger. So here we just have to solve Case because we don't really have any other option. Echoing Truth is a decent pickup. If they don't have enough ways to ritual out Belcher and immediately kill us with it, we could potentially bounce something with Belcher there. So we are in a, I mean, if they have enough mana, they can kill us here if they just have the mana together with Belcher. But it looks like they don't. They just replay Belcher. And here on end step, I Echoing Truth the Belcher, drawing another card. We draw the One Ring, which is okay. Then we draw Grapeshot. And here I'm leading on Grapeshot in case I can start to chain things more with Case. But if not, I always have the ability to fall back on the One Ring here as something which might be able to buy me a turn. And I just draw another One Ring, so it is going to have to be the One Ring. Draw a card, draw another land, and if our opponent has some sort of way to preserve 3 mana into next turn, then maybe they could have gotten us, but they don't. They just have the ability to replay out Belcher. We fetch to Thin, and we are able to draw some cards with the ring. Preordains are what we need because we need to start this Case chain going somehow. Desperate Ritual is perfect. We do have to win this turn because otherwise they can, even just playing the ring, they can wait and then hit us on our upkeep. So in this chain, I'm thinking about, is there a point where I'm going to need to Flusterstorm my own spell for the draw? And then I can Flusterstorm my own Flusterstorm. So if my cards get too low, this is something that I will think about. So for example, here I'm going to see the draw, but if I don't draw something useful, then I'm going to Flusterstorm my own Desperate Ritual. But I draw Grapeshot, which is decent, so I can keep chaining. Grapeshot, again, will draw me a card. The Remand is perfect here, because then that's just lethal. And then the Manamorpho seals the deal in case there was any sort of nonsense happening. So we get there over Belcher in kind of a weird series of games. The first game, they just kind of rolled us. The second game, they never saw a second land. And then the third, we had interaction for what they tried to do. So a turn 9 win in the duel between the two combo decks. So we've got 1 round left. We're 3-1. Will it be 4-1? Will it be 3-2? Stick around to find out. So we're here in round number 5. Our opening hand has 1 land, but it has these spike fields, which are also lands. And then we have the 1 ring, so we're looking to develop some mana, cast the 1 ring, and then go from there. We have interaction if our opponent has 1 toughness creatures. We even have the Grapeshot, which could be used interactively against a board full of smaller creatures or something like that. Our opponent leads on a Steam Vents. I'm going to play one of my tap lands here, because I figure it's pretty unlikely that I'm going to need to Spell Pierce something on turn 2 against the Steam Vents deck. It's not like they're going to play like an Expressive Iteration or something like that right away, and I'd rather develop some of this tapped mana so that I can potentially One Ring in a more timely fashion. I also don't really expect to need Spikefield Hazard that much. Now, if they had a Ragavan, they would have played it, I think. If they had a Dragon's Rage Channeler, they would have played it, I think. And then they play a Flooded Strand. So, maybe not Murktide? I don't remember if they play off-color fetches. But we play Island. Here, I'm figuring, okay, maybe we hold up a Spikefield if like they top deck a Ragavan and then a Dash Ragavan comes in. I'd like to still have an answer to that. And then I just have Spell Pierce in case they have like Iteration or whatever. They get basic Island. And then they Preordain. I'm not going to Spell Pierce that. I don't feel like I need to. I'd rather maybe try to use this defensively in order to make sure that my ring resolves. We draw Past in Flames, so here we kind of are priced into playing our cave. We just need to make our land drops, so we have no choice. Past in Flames is good and something we will eventually need here. Our opponent gets Hallowed Fountain, and then they flash in a Snapcaster Mage on our end step, so they're looking to get aggressive with the Snapcaster Mage. So our opponent is some sort of control deck. Jeskai Control, maybe. Maybe they're playing more colors for binding or something like that. We draw Remand, which is kind of not great. Are you Ritual here, really? Oh, I'm Morphos here. Yeah, I'm Morphos here looking for another land. And we get it. I would have also taken another Ritual. Either one lets me play the ring with Spell Pierce back up. So I'm going to fetch. I get a untapped land, just because I do want to preserve my life total in the face of like Snapcaster Beats, plus I'm assuming that I'm going to have a live ring for a few turns here, so I want to minimize the damage I take. And then we play the ring. Again, we have Spell Pierce as backup, but our opponent just lets it resolve, which is interesting. So I'm just going to pass into their turn. They could have like a Tidebinder or something like that here. I think they would have Tidebindered the ETB trigger, but maybe they want to specifically try and hit the draw trigger. So there's no reason to draw yet. It's not like I can play anything with what I get. So I can draw on their end step. And this means that they tap down for a Tidebinder. So maybe they are like a Flash Wizards deck. I would expect like Flame of Anor and stuff like that. We do have Grapeshot to kill this Tidebinder potentially, which could be good. So we are going to play Ritual, Grapeshot, and just kill it. Now we can use our ring and we can draw. I am going to shock this in so that we have both Remand and Spell Pierce up. Our opponent goes for a Wall of Omens. That is certainly a card. I haven't seen one of those since probably about 2018. Then they play an Island. So maybe they're holding up some sort of counterspell or something like that here. We do need to hit some more mana, but we're in an okay spot where we have an active One Ring. I'm going to Spike Field to kill this Snapcaster Mage to buy a little bit of time, and then look to pass here, still holding up Remand plus Spell Pierce. End step I can maybe consider. And we're looking to get this case of the Ransacked Lab resolved. Our opponent just passes the turn. So we're going to go for the case here, given that I have 2 pieces of interaction following that up, and they just let it resolve again. So I don't know what they have in their hand. They've got 6 cards. Maybe it's all like creature removal. They go for another Tidebinder, though. So I am going to Remand this. I just want to keep drawing cards. I'm still holding Spell Pierce up. Got a basic, because my life total is a little bit low. Maybe they have like Bolt in hand. I don't want to die to my own One Ring. But the cards I drew Ritual Morphos. So I can actually just Ritual Morphos and go for a Past in Flames here. Still holding up Spell Pierce. So we are chaining together some spells. There's a grapeshot in our yard. We get to 11. And then our opponent scoops because they see the writing on the wall. We have grapeshot. We have another Morphos in there. And we have Spike Field as well. So we win the first round against Control. We kind of played the card advantage game and out-card advantage them by relying on the power of the One Ring. That's been a theme this league. One Ring has been an excellent card, but Case has also been pretty good when we've been using it as an engine. So that's the key thing. I think thinking about it not just as a reducer, but also as an engine is pretty important. And if it can pull that sort of like double duty role, that's fantastic. It's just that we need to buy it a little bit of time to do so, because it's a little bit slow if we are trying to just purely race. Okay, so last round, potentially 2 games left, but this could be the last game if we win. Let's see what happens. So our opening hand here is kind of interesting. We have Stern Scolding, which I did bring in between the Snapcasters and the Tidebinders. I think they're playing a full playset of Tidebinder. I do just want to keep their ability to chip damage us off of the table. Ultimately, also, that's how they can acquire some card advantage with Flame of Nor and then like flashback things with Snapcaster. So I don't want to let them beat us at the card advantage game. I did board out some copies of the One Ring, which feels a little bit weird because One Ring is pretty powerful, but if they're leaning that heavily on Tidebinder, plus they maybe are, if they have white, they could be having some sort of like Leyline binding or something like that, although I think that is a little bit less likely with what they've showed so far. Also, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to resolve the ring against a counterspell deck, so that was my cut. I didn't bring in Flusterstorms because, again, they do seem fairly creature-heavy as far as a control deck. So I think there's a possibility they don't actually have that many instants and sorceries, especially not ones that I necessarily care about countering. I also cut some cases, and my thought process is I want to kind of use Empty the Warrens with as much control as I can in order to try to win here. Not sure if this is correct, so this sideboarding plan could definitely be wrong. Again, if you have a different idea and you want to talk about it, feel free to put a message into the comments, and I would be happy to do so. Our opening hand is okay. We're looking to just find some rituals in order to resolve this Empty the Warrens and play a little bit of a tempo game. And we draw a ritual for our first turn, so that's perfect. On turn 1, I don't mind passing with an open Tarn into them because they're not going to have Tidebinder yet. But if this was later, I would take the chance to fetch where I could. End step, I'm going to fetch the Thundering Falls, their control deck. This is a slower matchup, so I'm trying to utilize sort of every bit of card selection that I can. Don't feel like I need this Preordain though. I already have 2 Considers, and I'm really looking for mana and interaction at this point. So we'll play the Island, hold up double Consider or Consider plus Scolding. Our opponent doesn't go for an end step Snapcaster or anything like that. So on their end step, we can Consider. Same deal, I don't think I need the extra cantrip. It's interaction plus mana that we're looking for. Morphos is free Storm for empty, so I will keep that. And Remand was a good pickup. So we pick up a Spell Pierce, again decent, it's more interaction. We're going to shock that in and just hold up interaction. I know I could have gone for an empty here, but I don't want to just expose that into Tidebinder without a way of stopping Tidebinder. Our opponent just plays another land. And we'll just play another land. And our opponent just plays another land. And we'll just play another land. We picked up Grapeshot, which is kind of decent. So we can kind of look to maybe nickel and dime them here a little bit. So we resolved a Paretic. We're holding up Remand plus, or we're holding Scolding plus Spell Pierce really is what we're holding, or Remand, because we'll have 4 mana. So we're going to go for empty here and figure that if they Tidebinder the Storm Trigger, but they don't, we could Scolding it, and then we could Spell Pierce whatever their follow-up interaction is, like a counterspell that would try to stop our Scolding. So our opponent has 3 fetch lands here that they haven't used, so that life is relevant with these 6 goblins in play. And they're going to go for a Flash in Solitude, which we will happily Stern Scolding. We can't beat that Solitude because it has lifelink, and we could have killed it with Grapeshot, but I'll just, again, take the opportunity to use the Scolding where I can. Now that the Storm or the Goblin tokens are already in play, I'm not as worried about Tidebinder. They go for a Preordain, and then they find an Engineered Explosives, so that is tragedy. They kill our goblins, and we're sad. We go for the Consider on end step because we need to find another threat. We do find another copy of Empty the Warrens, which is slightly awkward here in that I could like Grapeshot and then Empty for 4 goblins, but that feels a little bit weak. Our opponent Preordains. And here, I do end up just choosing to go for the empty, because I need to put some sort of pressure on. So we've played the world's worst Raise the Alarm. Or I guess Dragon Fodder. Yeah, we've played 4 mana Dragon Fodder. 2 goblins. But it is a clock, and again, we're looking to be holding up interaction while we maybe combo, or while we try to get to a hand that can do something with these Grapeshots. They are only at 12 life. So we hit them for 2 with the goblins. They try to flash in a Snapcaster Mage that could bolt, so I'm going to go ahead and Stern Scolding this. They have another land. It is a fetch land. We attack with 2 goblin tokens. And they try to flash in a Tidebinder, which I am going to go ahead and remand just to draw a card. Draw another Ritual. And then they let us hit them down to 8. So we're in kind of a weird spot here. There's been 2 spells played this turn, so we could do 3-4 Grapeshot, Grapeshot. Now they can they can Tidebinder one of these Grapeshots. So it would be 3-4. We'd have a 5 damage Grapeshot, and then we'd do 1 more with a Grapeshot. They would have to turn down to 1. So basically, if I Ritual, Grapeshot, Grapeshot, we put them to 1. If they try to interact differently, maybe like play a counterspell on one of my Rituals or something like that, then we Spell Pierce and we just kill them. So I think it's worth putting them to 1, given that then they would have 1 creature in play. We'd have 2 goblins. If they have a removal for one of our goblins, they still can't attack with our creature. And we've turned off their fetch lands, and we're looking for just 1 more damage. We have our bolts in our deck note, because again, I wanted to be able to remove some of their creatures. And we also have our last grapeshot. We also could hit Past in Flames. So I do choose to go for it here. And as predicted, they Tidebinder the Storm Trigger, and we put them to 1. So they untap, they bolt both of my Goblin tokens, which is absolutely brutal, because now they can be clocking us with the Tidebinder. I was figuring that the Goblin tokens would sort of make, even if they had 1 removal, I figured, okay, maybe they have 1 removal, and that means that it makes the Tidebinders stay back. But they had double removal, and now they're clocking us with the Tidebinder. We pick up Remand, which is really not what we needed. It does potentially let us defend a bolt or something like that if we find a bolt. And they hit us to 8. Play a Hall of the Storm Giant. So if they have another land next turn, we are actually dead. But we draw a grapeshot, so that is 1 point of burn. And that's exactly what we need. Except they have a Dovin's Veto, which can't be countered. So I can't counter it, but I can remand my own grapeshot. And that draws the concession. We even draw the bolt for good measure. And we win match number 5 against Control. So we end up 4-1. I feel like this deck operated in an interesting way. And I like the idea of a slower, more interactive Storm deck that is using Ring and Case as engines and is keeping the interaction high in order to buy them time to win a slower, grindier game. Certainly, I think there could be some improvements to the list, to the sideboard. I will probably continue working on this a little bit, although my main focus will still be with Twiddle for the time being. If there is a deck you're interested in seeing, I strongly encourage you to let me know, and if it's something that I too find interesting, I would be happy to play it. I have on my radar doing a little bit more with Ad Nauseam at some point, although I do not think it is in the best spot at the moment. I know that there are a decent chunk of you here who probably are following me due to the Ad Nauseam content, so I want to make some more of that for some of you guys at some point. I also want to do some more with Twiddle, because that's just what I'm sort of most interested in at the moment and what I want to iterate on. Other than that, this has been testing Case of the Ransacked Lab in Blue-Red Storm, and until next time, keep casting spells and not casting creatures. Yeah, that. Don't cast creatures. Creatures are terrible. Jagantha, we didn't even play it once. Alright, bye. Take care.